I'm Amy, thank you for tuning in. Today I'm joined by the wonderful author of one of my favourite books, and I'm going to show you them, Kathryn Foxfield. So Kathryn has written Good Girls Die First, which came out last year, and It's Behind You, which is due to come out next month. So welcome, Kathryn. Thank you so much for joining us on my channel.
Hi, thank you.
Thank you for coming. I'm so excited to talk to you. Since I read Good Girls Die First last summer, I've been absolutely obsessed with your books. Well, book at that point. I'm desperate to read more, and this one I'm 2/3 the way through and it is so good. I'm just waiting. Oh, you've got yours too.
Yeah.
It's so creepy and atmospheric. So can you tell anybody who doesn't know about this book, can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so It's Behind You is a YA thriller horror, and it's about a reality TV show set in a haunted cave that goes horribly wrong when a cave-in traps the characters with someone or something that wants them dead. So the caves are said to be haunted by this local legend called the Puckered Maiden, who eats the hearts of the young and in love.
And it was also
this, I know, it's good, isn't it? I didn't think I'd get to keep that. I thought my editor would make me get rid of that, but no, I got to keep it. The caves are also the site of a recent local tragedy where a girl disappeared and was never heard of again. So as the contestants of the reality TV show try to escape, these two mysteries kind of collide, and they all turn on each other and discover that no one's exactly who they say they are.
I love that. And I love the fact that you allude to that the characters in the blurb from the very beginning, you kind of know that they're all coming into this situation for, you know, their own reasons. And it's really interesting as the book goes on, trying to work out who's in it and for, you know, and why. I'm trying to be really careful how I word that.
Yeah,
it's really, really good. I think I'll finish it in the next day or two. So I'm really excited to see how it all comes together. So as you were saying that blurb, I was just thinking about the things that your books have in common. And I feel like supernatural elements, but always that question of whether it is really supernatural or not is one.
Yeah.
And also like pulling on legends, which I think you did really cleverly. And as I was reading it, I felt like the Puckered Maiden was some local legend that you just kind of pulled into the book. Is that something that you set out to do, like kind of legends and supernatural versus real? Is that in your mission statement, or does that kind of develop as you go through the book?
Yeah, it's just something I love. I love a local legend and sort of creepy places that have this whole history wrapped up in them. And I just find it really scary, the whole, is it really something supernatural? Is that some scuttling footsteps you hear in the background, or is it all in your mind? So yeah, I think all of my books tend to have an element of that at the moment, the sort of human people being terrible to each other, and then the backdrop of this subtle supernatural horror.
Yeah, and I think the fact of it being a reality show adds that extra layer as well, because you don't know if it's real, supernatural, or something that the reality show is doing, because as we know, reality TV isn't exactly that real, is it?
No, you don't know who's pulling the strings and what parts are real.
So was there a sort of inspiration that led you into this book, or did you kind of tease it out and pull together the usual elements that you like? What was your approach to writing it?
Most of my books tend to come from a setting or sort of inspired by a place I visited, and I went through a phase, I guess a few years ago, of visiting lots of tourist attraction caves, because I love a spooky cave, and went to Cheddar Gorge and Wookie Hole caves and Hellfire caves.
Oh, that sounds good.
They're really good actually, and they have a little local legend associated with them of this girl who agreed to meet her lover, but he never turned up, and then she just vanished. And so that's quite similar, I guess, to mine. And yeah, so that's where it came from, just visiting these caves and thinking these would be a really great setting for a horror. And it all came from there.
So when did you start writing it?
Actually, this one I wrote very quickly. So I started writing it, I think, September last year. Yeah, it's sort of a 6-month turnaround on this one. It was, second book syndrome, I think. Sometimes it's quite hard to write your second book when you're actually writing for publication.
Oh, I was going to ask you about that actually, because I'm now in the situation that you were last year. Like, my book has obviously come out and I've got a couple of other things going, but I was wondering, was the second book syndrome a thing for you? Because I've heard that that's quite common.
My problem was I had a baby just as Good Girls Die First came out, and then the pandemic came along, and I was contracted for another book that's coming out next week, and it was very hard to write when I knew it was going to be published, and there was a lot more pressure involved. And yeah, I found it really difficult. Once I settled on the idea for It's Behind You, I wrote it really quickly and it was quite easy. But coming up with that idea, I found that really hard.
There's no sense of that reading it at all. It just kind of, one thing that you do is you somehow make a book seem really easy to read. And I know that that is a really tall order and it sounds almost like an insult, but it's not. It's like, yeah, you write easy books. I mean, like, they're really compelling, and you read a chapter, and I'm buddy reading this with somebody at the moment, and at first we were reading 3 chapters, but we decided that wasn't enough, so it's 5 now. And like within an hour we're sort of saying, right, I've read the next 5, can we read 5 more please? And it is just addictive, and we're getting faster and faster as we go through it. So I'm just back to the supernatural thing. I'm sorry, I'm going to take us off on all sorts of tangents here. But yeah, so are you interested more, do you think, then, in the supernatural horror, or do you think you would ever write about the kind of real horrors out there, or something that could really happen?
I think I write books that are meant to be pure escapism, I think, particularly It's Behind You, which takes itself a lot less seriously than Good Girls Die First did. And I just want to write something fun that people enjoy reading and that has larger than life characters, but isn't necessarily realistic. I mean, sometimes you want those books that have important topics and big messages, and then sometimes you just want to read about teenagers murdering each other and running away from ghosts. So I think I probably stay away from the big real world topics. I sometimes have an undercurrent and a slight message behind the book, but most of it's just fun, I suppose.
And thank you for that, because that's exactly what I want to read. So just keep writing them. Right, I'm going to consult the questions. Oh, that was what I wanted to ask you about next. So I know that when your book first came out, it got compared to point horror, and it was things like point horror for a new generation of teens. And I know that some commentators at the time were like, point horror, that's from the 90s. And I was like, the 90s are, I think just as cool now as they ever were, but I was a teen then. What do you think of the fact that there's obviously a Fear Street reinvent coming out, I think the same week as your book? How perfect is that? And that there's rumors of a point horror one as well. Like, why do you think it is that we keep coming back to like point horror and Fear Street, which, if people don't know, they're similar to Kathryn's books, like really fast paced and quite scary, but also light and don't take themselves too seriously? Like, why do you think it is that we are having a resurgence of this sort of horror?
Yeah, it's interesting how you get these themes that come back, and you get all of these books and films coming out at the same time. It's I think part of it's down to everyone's had a bit of a rubbish year, and so we all just want something that's surprising but at the same time predictable. And what I love about the type of horror, Fear Street, point horror type thing, is that it takes really well-known horror tropes like, I don't know, scary dolls or creepy clowns or haunted houses, and they're things that everyone's familiar with, but then it breathes new life into it, and you can be surprised, but you also know what you're getting, and it's just a break from the real world, I suppose. And I mean, that's why I write my books, and maybe that's why all of these films are coming out at the moment, because everyone just wants to zone out for a bit and forget about everything else.
Yeah, and I think the good thing with being a modern author doing what people were doing in the 90s as well is we are aware of that 90s culture, and we are aware of the books that were written in it, so we can kind of try and reinvent. Do you find that you try and lean into those tropes, or reinvent them, or do a bit of both, or do you not even think about it?
I guess I do subconsciously sort of pick up on things that I loved when I was a kid, and sort of try and breathe new life into them, and take things that I would have enjoyed reading when I was younger, but hopefully do them in a more modern way, and treat the characters slightly more respectfully than perhaps they were treated in point horror books, which haven't all aged as well as
not.
some other books. Yeah, I did love the 90s, but you have to sort of reinvent it for the new generation, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Although I did set my book in the 90s, I obviously can't let it go at all.
I would love to set a book in the 90s, but I don't think my editor would let me, so I have to stick to my brand for now.
Yeah, gosh, I wonder what my brand is. Am I going to be writing in the 90s forever? I don't know. I'll have to wait
You
and
should
see.
do, it'll be great. I love the 90s.
I do like other decades. I keep thinking that I've got an idea that might be set in the 70s and one that might be set in the 80s. So I might just skip about the decades until I run out of material.
That would be great.
But yeah, so on the subject of horror tropes, do you have a favourite one either to watch or that you would like to explore in your writing?
I don't know really. I love the sort of things you can't see in the dark type of horror trope. So the footsteps you can hear and the weird scratching, and is it real, is it not real? And I love the Babadook, that sort of, is it all in my head, and how much of this am I creating? And so yeah, I think that sort of thing I love. But then I obviously, if anyone's read my first book, I do love an abandoned amusement park and abandoned tourist attractions from the past. I think they're really creepy.
Yeah, it's so chilling, isn't it? How something that was kind of a pleasure at the time can turn into something really dark and sinister when it's shut
A bit
down.
of peeling paint is all you need, and an off-key soundtrack.
Yeah, exactly. I think your books would be really great, actually. Talking about the soundtrack, can you see your books being turned into films and TV shows, or would you prefer them to be kind of left alone as they are?
No, I would love for someone to write a screenplay and try and turn. I mean, I think Good Girls Die First would work quite well as a series, and you could focus on all the different characters. I think It's Behind You, I sort of wrote it vaguely with this thought in mind that it would make a kind of fun film, just because all of the reality TV show elements, I think it would translate quite well onto the screen, but we'll have to see.
It would be amazing, particularly It's Behind You. I feel like the characters are just, I think you said that they're larger than life, and I'd love to see how they would be cast. I just think it would be brilliant. I can imagine each of them so vividly, because I think Good Girls Die First, because I don't know whether because it was a bigger cast, I feel like they were a little bit more disposable. Does that mean? But like
no,
some of the characters, particularly, like you kind of thought you're not going to last very long at all. Whereas these, I've grown to like them quite a lot, some of them. And yeah, I think that I could see them on screen. So did you have a different approach to writing characters across the two books?
So in my first book, I just wanted to write 10 of the most awful people I could think of, and then try and make them compelling and sympathetic in some cases, not in all cases, but just sort of try and write a book which was just a cast of villains, basically. And then in the new book, I wanted to write some nice people, and but also awful people at the same time. There's some of the more irritating people who you could imagine. Yeah, so I just tried to pick sort of not stereotypes, but sort of types of character that you would think of, or you think of the reality TV show fans, but then twist them a bit and make them more real.
Yeah, you do a really great job. I think that your books are very cohesive, but at the same time, this feels like a step in a new direction. And I think that's amazing as an author to have a brand, but be able to explore that differently. So well done. I'm going to look at the questions again. Oh, that was the next one. So we've talked about your books and what you've been doing, obviously since your first book came out, but what was your journey to publication like?
So I used to be a scientist. I was a scientist
for
about
I didn't know that.
15 years, and I started writing as a hobby, just to give me something to do at the weekends. And then I suppose I spent probably close to 10 years sending queries off to agents and not getting anywhere. And I predominantly wrote fantasy at the time. And Good Girls Die First was my first attempt at a horror. And I just wrote it for a bit of fun. And then I entered it into a competition about 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago now. And it came in as runner-up, and I signed with an agent. And then everything went incredibly quickly from then. I think we did some revisions and she sold it within a few months. And then it came out less than a year after I'd signed the contract. And so, yeah, it was sort of the first half of it was all incredibly slow and boring and repetitive, and I had no idea what I was doing. And then everything since signing up with an agent has been like this whirlwind of stuff happening, which I think is more common than you'd realise with publication. It's like you think of the overnight success, but actually they've been writing for 15 years.
Yeah,
exactly. Not getting anywhere.
Overnight success after 10 books, but it's the first one that gets published. Yeah, I mean, I was a reader for that novel award, and I can remember reading, was it called Whisper Pier at the time?
Yeah, Whisper Pier.
Whisper Pier. And I remember reading it and just thinking, this is an unpublished book. Like, I couldn't even believe it. I was so busy at the time, and I just really wanted to read the whole thing. And I'm glad I didn't, actually, because then I got to have the experience of like the published book in my hands. But it was just amazing. And I think straight away there was, even though that was obviously just edited by you and at the early stages, you could just see the talent there. It's brilliant. And it's so weird to think that now we're talking as authors and we're both published. Like,
I know things have changed so much, haven't they, in just a few years?
Yeah, and Write Mentor obviously is an amazing part of lots of people's publication journey. I think I was a mentee the first year they did it, and then a mentor. And I think when you look back at their catalogue of people, there's been a lot of success, I think, coming out.
I know, it's changed a lot of people's lives. So I think Stuart's doing an amazing job with it all. So yeah.
So that's always my advice, I think, to find your group of people. And Right Mentor definitely did that for me. I think some of my critique partners who I rely on the most I met from Right Mentor. Do you have any other advice for aspiring authors that you sort of would find useful?
I guess it's just be as stubborn as you can be and keep trying, because I just know so many people who are still writing great books and yet still haven't managed to find an agent or a publisher. And there's a lot of people out there who should be published and who aren't. And it's just a case of waiting for the right time and for the trends to come around and for your book to get its chance. So yeah, I think that's the only advice I can give, really. Be stubborn and keep trying.
It's good advice, because I mean, your book was a relatively short time frame. I got my deal and then it was something like 18 months. So before it got published, I had no idea that horror was going to be in at the moment. Like, everybody could have been completely down on anything to do with vampires, could have been just horribly uncool. And the fact that I've just said uncool probably makes me horribly uncool. But anyway, so it is interesting, isn't it, that you have just got to play that game of people are forecasting what they think will be popular in a couple of years' time. And you've got to keep on going. I know people in the same situation who are fantastic writers and either have an agent and haven't got a book deal yet, or they're still looking for an agent. So I think perseverance is definitely needed. Even at this point, we're still waiting for news all the time, aren't we? And think about what our next book will be, and will it sell rights in different countries and things. So I think it never stops, even when you
I think there's always, will I get another contract? And it's always going to be scary, but we've done the first step now, so hopefully
we have. So speaking of scary, I warned Kathryn that I was going to ask this question so that she could prepare. So I like to see, as you can see from the room behind me, I have quite a collection of spooky objects that I've acquired over the years. In fact, that bride is looking really intimidating in the background. I'm sorry about that. It's almost like I knew you were coming, Kathryn. I've written like a spooky female into my room. So do you have something spooky that you can share with us?
I've got something quite creepy. I can't have too much spooky in my house because my children will be traumatized, actually. But I quite like this guy. This is my scariest thing I own. He's like, I love a puppet. I can't get him in the shot. There he is. Hello, how are you doing? So yeah, creepy hair puppet thing. He's brilliant. I want to write a book around sort of creepy puppets. But Kat Ellis's Harrow Lake sort of got there before me, and that was just so good that I don't want to do a puppet now because I feel like she's done that. But we'll see.
I don't know, you could. Yours is, look at the way his head's turning. I can't concentrate.
Right.
That's terrifying. And is that a children's toy as well? Because I feel like that adds it an extra layer of menacing.
It could have been. I don't think I'd let my children play with it because my little girl has nightmares sometimes. She'll say, that rabbit came to life last night and came in my room. I was like, no, it didn't.
No, I wonder where she got that idea from. That is brilliant. Thank you. I didn't expect you to show that at all. I'm glad that was a surprise and I'd not seen it in advance. Terrifying. And it's no wonder, is it, that we turned out the way we did and wrote these scary books when that's our source material.
I know.
So what is it that you enjoy about horror then? In terms of, why do we intentionally read stuff, watch stuff, and in our case write stuff that we know is going to scare probably ourselves and other people? What do you think it is about horror?
I think I love horror because anything's possible and you get to put your characters in these awful situations and find out exactly what they're made of. And I just think it's a great way to find out what a person's like and what they're capable of when they're pushed to the limits. And books for me are always about the characters. So the horror's just a sort of the window dressing, I guess, the sort of the bits that make everything possible. And I just love the fun elements of horror. I'm not a massive gore and murder and blood fan, although my books are quite gory and murderous in places. I just like evil characters and people doing terrible things, which I think works really well with the horror genre, obviously.
Yeah, it does. And I think that your books do what I really like about horror, having like elements of different genres as well. Like, I feel like It's Behind You is about this disparate group of people who are getting to know each other. And I'm at this point where some characters that kind of hated each other are developing a bit of a rapport. And I really like that. Was that something, did you want to explore different genres when you were writing, or does that just come through organically?
I suppose it's all a mismatch of things that I've read. So I don't read only horror. I'm not a big scary stuff fan. I like thrillers and I like light horror, but I don't read much adult horror because it just scares me too much. So yeah, I think it's just everything that I've read, and it just all comes through in what I write, I suppose.
That's really cool. And I think it obviously works really well because your books are incredibly successful, incredibly good from my point of view. I think I have a couple more questions. Oh, yes. So I don't know whether I warned you about this question, so you might have to think on the spot. I asked Kat Ellis the same question, and I want to see what you think. So if you're going to build a horror film or book using elements from different films and books that you like, what would you do? And I'll give you Kat's as an example so you can think about it. Kat decided that she was going to put the kids from the Goonies and that whole setup of going to hunt for treasure together with The Descent, so that they were going to go into this horrifying cave that had something in it. And we decided that it would be the kids from the Goonies as well, just to make it that big word. So you would love them and then they would start getting picked off one at a time. So do you have any mashups that spring to mind, or have I just put you on the spot?
No, that's
really difficult.
Interesting. I'm thinking now because I'm thinking, oh, the Goonies, that's such a good answer. I should have gone with that. I think maybe the kids from Stranger Things. Yes. I love that series. They were brilliant, and I just love the chemistry between them all. I love the chemistry between all the characters in Knives Out as well, all the people wanting to kill each other. And so would either go for the Knives Out cast or the Stranger Things. The setting, I think I have a thing for abandoned tourist attractions, as I said. So I think maybe the amusement park from Zombieland.
Oh, yes.
Just it's creepy and weird and fun at the same time. I'd have maybe the premise based on the cabin in the woods, because I love that idea of people pulling the strings and what's real and what's not, which I think comes through and it's behind you. So yeah, let's go with the Stranger Things kids with cabin in the woods, but set in an abandoned amusement park.
Do it, Kathryn. Is anyone from Scholastic watching? Like that? That just sounds brilliant. I'd read that. I think you and Kat both have just come up with brilliant answers on the spot. I need to come up with my own, but I feel like I'd let myself down horribly after those. So I'll leave it for next time, maybe. So, this is my last question. What are you working on now or planning to do next in the event that you're having a break?
No breaks here. I'm writing another horror thriller at the moment that's it's got elements of both Good Girls Die First and It's Behind You, but will be a little bit different. I think it'll be a bit more of a thriller, but we will see what happens.
Exciting. So what stage are you at with that? How far have you got into it?
I've got most of the first draft written, so obviously that needs to be completely scrapped and rewritten so that it actually makes sense. But I've got the idea in my head now, and that's the important thing. So hopefully it will be there. We'll see.
I'm going to ask you one more question, actually, because you just made me think of something else. So what do you find hardest about the writing process? Is it that initial idea, as you said, or the writing or the editing part of it?
I love editing. Once I've got a first draft finished, I just love all of the editing process. It's brilliant. So it's getting the first draft down that I find really difficult. I have my idea and sort of come up with a rough plot for it and a synopsis and a pitch, and I enjoy all of that bit. But then when it comes to actually trying to write it, you get to about 20,000 words and the characters have to actually start doing things, and yeah, I find that really difficult.
Oh my god, how did you know? That's the point that I was at about 2 weeks ago, 20,000 words, and I went, okay, what happens next? And I had to have about 4 days off just to do some plotting and figure out like where this book was actually going.
I normally scrap everything at about 20,000 words, write a better synopsis and then restart and sort of Frankenstein's monster bits from the old version and try and make it all stick together again.
I did similar. I stopped, plotted, and then like went back over the bit that I'd written and made it better. And I'll probably need to do that 20 times over until I'm happy with it. But...
yeah. Is it another vampire one?
It might be. I'll have to tell you about it when we're not on camera. So I've got a few projects on the go, and one under contract, one that is very much at the idea stage, and then one that I was writing but have abandoned for the one under contract. So yeah, quite a few things going on.
How you have the time?
I don't really. I just write all night. When the baby goes to bed, I start writing. So do you have any tips about that? When do you fit your writing in?
When he naps, he has a couple of naps during the day, and so I'll do a bit of writing then. And my house is chaos because I don't do anything else. I mean, I do feed my children and occasionally wash their clothes, but everything else gets abandoned. And then once both kids are in bed, I'll sit down and pour a glass of wine and then try and do a bit of writing. But it's a very slow process when you have kids and you're trying to write books. So I wouldn't recommend it, to be honest. But,
I'm exactly the same, and I do envy these people sometimes who can write all day. And I'm sort of still doing a day job and writing and child. So yeah, it's hard work,
Yeah,
but
a
it's
lot,
great.
isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the pandemic was just the icing on the cake of a
I
difficult
know.
year anyway. But yeah, at least we seem to be hopefully moving out of that.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah.
And on that positive note, I think we will end. So thank you so much for joining us. I've had a really good time talking to you. And whenever I talk to people like you who are really accomplished, I find myself trying to soak up all your ideas. Like I feel like I'm going to have to watch it again afterwards and make notes on like your strategies for writing scary things. So thank you so much, Kathryn. Thank you to everyone who's watched this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I have got some other fantastic author interviews lined up and some fun content to do with writing and reading. So I hope you will stick with me and like and subscribe. And thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.